IHMA is organizing these kind of activities regularly. If it now, due to the like current scenario, we are conducting it in the online manner, but otherwise we used to conduct seminars and all other activities in Kasaragod district. We used to conduct like seminars and family meets. So people who are interested to join in IHMA, we welcome you all to our IHMA family. So I request people who has not taken IHMA membership, kindly please join with us and cooperate with us. Thank you. And Dr. Chitra?
Yes. Okay, thank you, Dr. Suraj. Good afternoon all. Thank you, HMA, for giving me this opportunity once again. Now let's going on to a topic. It's Parkinson's disease, researchers in pathology, and its management. Can you hear?
Yeah, we can hear you. Okay, no problem.
Okay, so let's go on to a case first. It's a case during my PG time, treated by Dr. Abdul Hamid, our professor. The patient was aged 48 years old. It's a male. I will just go into the brief notes on the case, just essence of the case. First in complaint was tremor of hands since 2 to 3 years, slowness of speech, difficulty in walking. And it started 24 years back. While going to history only, we get how long the disease is in him. It's 24 years back. It started as tremor of fingers while holding small objects like spoon, pen, etc. Then gradually tremor got aggravated, shivering of whole body. Then speech became difficult and slow. Other movements also became slow to initiate, and he tended to fall backward when walking, stooping posture, everything began to appear. And since 2 to 3 years, his all complaints got aggravated, and only then others came to notice all the symptoms, and he developed profuse salivation, frequent urgent urinate, etc. I took various treatments without much relief. And the generals on a glance, he said warm food and drink salt, sleep was good. There was generalized sweat, frequent urging, not finished sensation after voiding, aversion covering, thermal was more to hot. And while examining nervous system, he was conscious, well oriented of time and space, gait was slow stooping, there was rigidity, deep reflexes were exaggerated, Webenski's sign was positive, then glabellar tap reflex was preserved, autonomic disturbances, like profuse salivation, frequent micturition, etc. was present. Then sensations, pain, touch, everything were preserved. So the provisional diagnosis was Parkinsonism and also BPH. The lab investigation was done. In USG, there was prostatomegaly. Residual urine volume was about 200 ml. So both diagnoses at provisional level, and see the totality of symptoms, mental symptoms, was easily anchored and impulsive, tremor of hands during rest, frequent urination. Most of the disease symptoms came up, and my professor, can you suggest any remedy for this case? Let's start with the case, and you can, I think you can leave your message in chat box. It is make a little more interesting by without directly going to the pathology or what Parkinson's disease is. Let us start with discussing this case. These are the totality of symptoms. Okay, let me continue.
Yeah. You can continue. Okay.
Okay. So from this totality of symptom, professor gave medicine was Merxol. Merxol 1 m was given, and he had some itching of scrotum, aggravation, washing, etc. That was ameliorated after Emsol, and then it was followed by general amelioration. Everything was ameliorated, and by the end of the month, he was almost controlled in his tremor, his profuse urination, his autonomic disturbances were uncontrolled. So I just discussed this case, and we will look into the pros and cons of the case, how we can manage the cases, and what are supportive measures are needed, etc. later. So let's see what Parkinson's disease is. So this is just a case, just to let you know how this case was managed, and we shall discuss more details of this later. Okay. So this is Parkinson Awareness Month. Parkinson Awareness Month was in April, and April 11 is celebrated as Parkinson's Day, just because the James Parkinson, who provided the first medical description of Parkinson's disease, was born in April. So his birth month, April, is celebrated as Parkinson's Awareness Month. And later, more description of Parkinson's disease was given by Jean-Martin Charcot and other Parkinsonian disorders. Those other disorders having similar symptoms of Parkinson's were added to the group. And today, Parkinson's disease represents the second most common neurodegenerative disorder with an estimated global prevalence of over 10 million. And the first position is held by Alzheimer's disease. Now this is red tulip. Red tulip is the symbol of Parkinson's disease. As we know, breast cancer is denoted by pink ribbon, Alzheimer's disease by purple ribbon, and Parkinson's disease is denoted by red tulip. And it was developed by J.W.S. van der Wereld, a Dutch horticulturist who himself had Parkinson's, and he dedicated and named this tulip for James Parkinson. And James Parkinson first described Parkinson's disease in his essay on shaking palsy, which was an old term used for Parkinsonism. Now, what is Parkinson's disease? This is a degenerative disease affecting basal ganglia, which present with different combination of slowness of movement, increased tone, tremor, and loss of postural reflexes. These are the cardinal symptoms. It affects about 1 million individuals. Peak age of onset is in the early 60s. And Parkinson's disease accounts for about 75% of all cases of Parkinsonism. And the remaining cases result from other neurodegenerative disorders, cerebrovascular disease, drugs, etc. And the familial form, which has a genetic predominance, autosomal dominant or recessive forms, these have earlier age of onset. Otherwise, it has late age of onset. So the case which we discussed was 48 years of age male. So he was having a genetic predominance and the medicine came out was Merxol. Okay, now although most patients appear to have no strong genetic determinant, there will be always an interaction between gene and the environmental factors. Let's see the risk factors: positive family history, male gender, head injury, some pesticides, consumption of well water, rural living, etc. Possibly due to the mixing up of waters with pesticides and other chemicals. Now, the factors associated with reduced incidence, coffee drinking, smoking, use of NSAIDs, estrogen replacement in postmenopausal women, etc. But these factors are not yet clearly proven as having a direct effect on reducing the Parkinson's disease. Researchers are yet going on, hence we cannot advocate any patients to start
Dr.
coffee drinking
Chitra?
or...
Dr. Chitra,
Okay.
can you
Okay.
go a little bit slow?
Okay, I thought we are running out of time, lot of slides to
No,
show.
nothing like that.
Okay, okay. Okay, I think you can follow. These are basics.
Yeah, I think you just reduce the speed. It's okay. We can
Okay,
have
okay,
an extra time of 10 or 15 minutes. Okay.
okay, thank you. Okay, so the reduced incidence of Parkinson's cannot be directly attributed to this because these factors are again under researchers. So we cannot advocate directly to or promote coffee drinking or smoking to the patients. That's what I intended to say. Okay, now let's go on to clinical features. You all might be knowing, but let's brief the clinical features. So the three cardinal signs are rest tremor, rigidity, and bradykinesia. And at least two of these signs must be present to diagnose the case as Parkinson's. The classical syndrome may be absent initially and non-specific symptoms may be present. Usually the patient may be coming with non-specific symptoms in the initial stages with tiredness, aching limbs, mental slowness, depression, small handwriting, etc. The tremor is almost always unilateral. It's a resting tremor that is characteristic. And you know the characteristic pill rolling tremor. Again, the tremor may also affect legs, mouth, and tongue. And postural tremor can also be there. We have to distinguish between different diseases having different types of tremors. Okay. Now, the bradykinesia may develop gradually, and the patient almost always complain with difficulty in tasks requiring fine movements like fastening of buttons, shaving, writing, etc. Then soft speech, siluria, etc. are the troubling manifestations of bradykinesia. And the rigidity. Rigidity is another cardinal feature. There will be increased muscular tone, stiffness, flexed posture, and the writing reflexes are impaired. That is, the patient may not be able to balance. And there will be two types of rigidity. You all know, plastic rigidity and cogwheeling. Plastic rigidity is usually seen in lower limbs, the characteristic of which is the full range of motion is affected. And whereas in cogwheeling, there is brief, regular interruptions of resistance during passive movement. And cogwheel rigidity is usually seen in upper limbs. Okay. Now, regarding physical abnormalities, in a short, you can see tremor, mask-like faces, arms flexed, rigidity, stoop posture, etc. So in general, there will be expressionless face, greasy skin. I think we all are expressionless now due to COVID, using masks. And now soft, rapid, indistinct speech, flex posture, in-bed posture reflexes, etc. And the gait will be slow to start walking, shorten stride, rapid small steps, tendency to run, reduced arm swing, and impaired balance on turning. So the two terms which we have to remember while saying about gait is Festinen gait and freezing of gait. Festinen gait is the classical sign with combination of flexed posture, loss of postural reflexes, and the patient is caused to accelerate in an effort to catch up with the body's center of gravity. And the freezing of gait is seen in advanced cases where at the onset of motion, the patient will be in a like a statue, hesitate to move, like our restox. When attempting to change direction or turn around, he will be freeze. And upon entering a crowded room or narrow space, such as a doorway, there will be a freezing of gait. And if this is a predominant symptom in our patient, we can think of urgent nitricum, aconite, etc. So these two terms, Festinen gait and freezing of gait, usually they may write in short form FOG. So these lot of short forms will be there, especially in neurological cases. We have to get acquainted with these terms. FOG is just freezing of gait. Okay. Then postural instability, as I said earlier, the simple test is pull test. What is pull test? Just pull the patient from the back. What happens? Usually, normally, we tend to regain balance by taking 2-3 steps backward. Normally, we can do that. But in case of Parkinson's patient, the patient may not get balance and it may tend to fall down. So the physician and the assistants should be careful, give enough space to take balance, to take 2-3 steps backward. At the same time, they should be careful to let not the patient fall down and get injured. This is a simple test, full test to check the postural instability. Now the non-motor symptoms. So the motor symptoms we discussed, main are bradykinesia, tremor, rigidity, etc. The non-motor symptoms are hyposmia, which mark high ranking in the non-motor symptom, hyposmia. Smell, the ganglion of olfactory nerve is affected due to some protein aggregates, so hyposmia. Then the next common thing is constipation, then anxiety, rapid eye movement, sleep behavior disorder, depression, excessive daytime sleepiness, impaired reaction time, impaired executive function. These are non-motor symptoms. And importance of these are, most of the time, these symptoms may be the earlier manifestations, and we may tend to overlook PD, Parkinson's disease. So intestinal dysfunction, constipation can be a most common GI complaint. And meta-analysis, different studies suggested that. This is an interesting fact. See, constipated individuals are twice as likely to develop Parkinson's disease within the next 10 years. Okay, many prospective and retrospective studies have found this as true. That is, the constipation becomes apparent at an average of 15.6 to 24 years before PD is diagnosed. So a constipated patient for a long period of time, when he's coming to into our OP, after ruling out all other factors like thyroid disorders or intestinal affections, everything else, please keep in mind chance of Parkinson's disease also. So it can be an earliest indicator of Parkinson's disease. Now, sensory symptoms. Sensory symptoms, there can be distressing sensation of inner restlessness like akathisia, aching pain and discomfort in the extremities, and some patients may develop subjective shortness of breath. And another fact is that most of the symptoms are developed by the dopaminergic drugs itself. The medication they are giving, the supplement of dopamine on a long course, they tend to develop lots of side effects similar to the disease itself. It may aggravate most of the symptoms. It may trigger hallucinations. So there are a lot of side effects for dopamine. Sleep disorders, impaired daytime alertness, restless legs, then vivid dreams and hallucinations, sleep apnea, sleep disturbances, etc. may occur. And autonomic dysfunction, it can be very troublesome. Most of the patient may come to us with this orthostatic hypotension, the postural instabilities. Then paroxysms of drenching sweats may occur in advanced PD. There can be excessive sweating, seborrhea, urinary troubles, etc. And in aged person, we have to rule out BPH as well, benign prostate hypertrophy as well. Okay. Then other neuropsychotic symptoms, changes in the mood, cognition, behavior, etc. are accompaniments of Parkinson's. But it can also be there in many other comorbid pathologies like Alzheimer's, dementia, Lewy body dementia, etc. Depression, anxiety disorders, dysfunction in memory, executive function, attention, mental flexibility. So a lot of cognitive functions are also affected in Parkinson's. So we have to rule out other conditions having similar symptoms. And psychotic symptoms, as I already said, that can be hallucinations, visual illusions. These are present in advanced stage where the patient move on to psychosis. Sometimes schizophrenia may add up. This can be in advanced stages. And also another main factor is, as I said earlier, the drug therapy may trigger these psychotic symptoms, not only by the normal progression of the disease, but by the medication they are taking, it may trigger these psychotic symptoms. That's one of the dangerous side effects, which we can control by our drugs. And this impulse control disorders are another group of disorder which can be completely attributed to these dopaminergic agents. Hypersexuality, compulsive shopping, compulsive eating, repetitive handling, examine of mechanical objects, etc. can be produced by these dopaminergic agents. So that was about the clinical features. In short, we covered motor symptoms, non-motor symptoms, the sensory symptoms, then neuropsychotic symptoms, then the psychosis, the schizophrenic conditions, etc. that can occur during the course of the illness. So let us see the pathology. The topic name I given was recent researches in the pathology. Why should we know pathology? As homeopaths, we need only symptoms to arrive at a drug, isn't it? But we should know pathology just because we should know the recent advances, what is going around us, and how we can imply this pathology for our selection of medicine, or at least for the management of the patient, and also in future researches, what our medicine can do in all these conditions. If this is the pathology, what can be done? Hopefully, more scientists who are genuinely interested in our system may help us to prove what is in our medicine, what nanoparticles or ultra dilutions, what is in our medicine. So how this pathology is tackled by our medicine, it's a future area of interest. So I shall brief the pathology. There are numerous recent researches going on in Parkinson's. Let us look into a few of the researches. Okay. So the neurodegenerative diseases are classified on the basis of protein aggregates that characterize the pathology. So these proteins are believed to play a critical role in the pathogenesis. So there can be a lot of neurodegenerative diseases, and depending on the protein aggregate, they are classified. So there can be basically three types. One is alpha-synucleinopathies, and here comes our Parkinson's disease. The other morbidities are dementia, Lewy bodies, and multiple system atrophy. These three are having alpha-synucleinopathy. That is, alpha-synuclein is a protein aggregate found in this. Another group is taupathies, where tau protein is aggregated. That is PSP, progressive supranuclear palsy, and corticobasal degeneration. There is another small proportion of cases which is having TDP-43opathies. That is, example, corticobasal syndrome. So our Parkinson's comes under alpha-synucleinopathy. Let's see what's happening with alpha-synuclein. So in Parkinson's, there is depletion of the pigmented dopaminergic neurons in the substantia nigra, and there is hyaline inclusion in nigral cell bodies, and atrophic changes, depletion of neurons, etc. in substantia nigra and locus coeruleus respectively. So what is happening when there is reduced dopaminergic output from the substantia nigra? It is going to have a reduced inhibitory effect on the subthalamic nucleus. So there is reduced inhibition upon subthalamic nucleus. What is subthalamic nucleus doing? it has reduced inhibition, so it becomes more active. In what? It becomes active in inhibiting the activation of cortex. So there is more inhibition of the cortical activity. So the motor activity is affected, hence bradykinesia. That's a simple pathology there. Now, another pathology is there is neuroinflammation going on, and there is glial cell activation, pro-inflammatory signaling molecules, and oxidative stress. These three mechanisms are contributing to the neurodegeneration: neuroinflammation, glial cell activity, pro-inflammatory signaling molecules, oxidative stress. And the highly other relevant factor which we discussed was protein alpha-synuclein. What is happening to alpha-synuclein? This protein adopt a beta sheet structure under certain circumstances. When it adopts beta sheet structure, it loses membrane binding capacity and tend to get aggregated. These aggregated proteins are what we call the inclusion bodies, levoneurites and levobodies, which are composed of fibrillar phosphorylated ubiquitinated alpha-synuclein. These are the histological hallmark of Parkinson's. These aggregations are found upon autopsy. And these are already, as we discussed, another two morbid conditions having the same synucleinopathies, Lewy body, and multiple system atrophy. The fact remains that individuals with mutations or overexpression of alpha-synuclein develop early onset, rapidly progressive Parkinson's disease. So the genetic tendency, early onset Parkinson's disease, having mutations or overexpression of this gene, alpha-synuclein gene. Then it's also initiated in hyper-branched, non-myelinated neuron terminals. This aggregation are found in neuron terminals as well. So what happens? It can spread via retrograde axonal transport, and hence the autonomic nerves are also affected. So this is just linear substantia nigra in Parkinson's disease, the dopamine which is produced from tyrosine. And let's see some of these studies. This is a model of gut inflammation driven.
Don't
Yes.
feel bad. There are lots of students are also participating for our webinar. They're just their suggestions that can you bit explain and can you bit go slow. It's no need to read all the slides and all. So you can move slow and we can have another session. No problem. Okay. No need to finish in 1 hour. No problem. Okay.
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 Are they feeling it difficult to follow?
Yeah. Some are messaging me personally actually. It's okay. Not everybody can follow everything, but it's okay. Okay.
Okay. It was just a simple pathology I just discussed. It was regarding alpha-synuclein protein that was just aggregated in the sites which are affected by Parkinson's disease. That's a simple pathology. Now going on to another research. It is model of gut originating inflammation. We already discussed about some non-motor symptoms. That is, the patient may presenting with intestinal dysfunction. Okay. So what is actually happening? Some researchers went into that direction. And what was found was there is innate immune response in the gut. And these trigger alpha-synuclein aggregation even in nerves supplying these regions. And this synucleinopathy is transmitted from gut to the brain via the vagus nerve, which is otherwise called gut-brain axis. And this triggering of inflammation actually promote a systemic inflammation, and it in turn increase blood-brain barrier permeability. So what this study tends to reveal is that gut originating inflammation ultimately lead to Parkinson's. Like gut inflammation is transferred to brain and promoting neuroinflammation, and this leads to neurodegeneration. This was proved by this study. Okay, I think you can follow this. So what's the relevance of this study? What's the relevance of this study?
You can go.
Okay, so the relevance of that study is we can target premotor intestinal stages of Parkinson's disease, because in modern medicine, they are only they used to think PD as a different entity, and the gastric symptoms they refer to gastroenterologist, right? But our homeopathy, we homeopaths, we give importance to concomitant symptoms, okay? So concomitancy, we got it here. See, I think by recent or future researchers, we may get much answer to our concomitant symptoms, any linkage with that symptom to the presenting symptom or the present condition. Here, premotor intestinal stages of Parkinson's disease can be targeted because it's an initial stage of inflammation that may ultimately lead to neuronal inflammation and result in Parkinson's disease. Okay, hope you got it.
Yeah.
Then another study. So I told you actually we are going through some of the recent researches so that we can also explore the various field where we can apply our medicine. Okay, so this is excessive early life dietary exposure regarding an elevated brain iron. This study tends to say that those children who are having a high intake of fortified foods, iron-rich foods, etc., they tend to get more deposition of iron in brain. So actually during aging also iron accumulates in brain. So both of these may tend to trigger an inflammatory process due to iron deposition. So there can be, we may use this iron as a biomarker in future for assessing the Parkinson's disease. That was the intention of this study. Okay. Going to another study. This is neuromelanin organelles. These are specialized autolysosomes that accumulate undegraded proteins and lipids in aging human brain and are likely involved in Parkinson's disease. So what are neuromelanin? They are just a brown pigment. They are in the subcellular compartments of brain. What's happening? This neuromelanin are functioning as an autolysosome. So they have all degraded, disintegrated waste particles of the neurons, which have accumulated over time. And when these autolysosomes break open, what happens? These particles are released. Okay, so these release of particles again tend to trigger another inflammation. Okay, the neuromelanin released by degenerating neurons activates microglia, producing reactive and pro-inflammatory molecules. Hence, there is a vicious cycle of neuroinflammation and neurodegeneration. Hope you got. Neuromelanin are pigments, and neuromelanin is a pigment, and neuromelanin containing organelles are present in all these Parkinson disease targeted areas like substantia nigra, locus coeruleus, etc. These areas are rich in neuromelanin containing organelles. So these organelles function as autolysosomes. They have all the disintegrated particles of the neurons, dead neurons, etc. So when these neuromelanin are released, when they release these degenerating neurons, when neuromelanin are released, they activate inflammatory reaction, and in turn this continues neuroinflammation, neurodegeneration, again triggering neuromelanin, again inflammation. So there is a vicious cycle. Okay. Now tending on to another study. This is mitochondrial dysfunction within the synapses of substantia nigra neurons. It just tend to say that in Parkinson's disease, mitochondrial populations are increased within axons, and they are expressed high, and the mitochondria express higher levels of key electron transport chain proteins compared to controls. So this mitochondrial dysfunction is prominent in both aging and Parkinson's disease. And see, to facilitate continued neuronal transmission, what happens? More mitochondrial populations are there in the neurons. Okay, so there is a dysfunction in mitochondria, but body compensates it by increasing the population in the remaining axons. Those are lost. So there is reduction in number of empty synapses in Parkinson's disease, and the compensatory event may represent a novel target for future restorative therapies. This mitochondrial dysfunction or mitochondrial triggering inflammatory reactions are key factors behind Parkinson's. And many genes like alpha-synuclein, they are also capable of interacting with mitochondria and cause their dysfunction. This is one model in flies, Drosophila. Here, they studied about LRRK2 gene, which is leucine-rich repeat kinase. So the flies bearing mutations showed that they cannot feed. Their proboscis became slower and stiffer. And when they were given levodopa or LRRK2 inhibitors, they were rescued. So this highlight the proboscis extensor response as a useful tool to identify PD-associated mutations. That's all. It was a research in flies. Again, mitochondrial impairment in microglia amplifies inflammatory changes. Then as I said, LRRK2 levels, it's a leucine-rich receptor kinase. These are increased in immune cells. In patients with Parkinson's disease, high levels of LRRK2 are seen, and mutations of this can be the common genetic cause of PD. So monitoring this level also can be helpful in assessing Parkinson's. Okay, this we already discussed, like gut-brain axis. So there is a lot of microbiota in our intestine which may trigger inflammatory reaction. This can also be found in multiple sclerosis, autism, depression, schizophrenia, etc. Now, the final study is about loss of phosphodiesterase expression. This was also associated with progression and severity in Parkinson's disease. So these were the few researchers. These findings in this research support that this phosphodiesterase 10A could be targeted with novel pharmacotherapy. So regarding these pathological studies, this will give us an insight into different researches going on and what all can be targeted in future, what our nanomedicines or our ultra dilutions of alkaloids can do in these spheres, like how it is going to affect genetically, how it is going to help phosphodiesterase, how it is affecting alpha-synuclein. Are our medicine crossing the blood-brain barrier? What is helping it to cure Parkinsonism or just to improve the Parkinsonism, etc. These are future areas of research. So I just thought to give an awareness regarding some of the researches that was going on. Okay. So now what can be done to assess the Parkinson's case? It's a neurological examination, first we have to do the mental status examination. Again, cranial nerve examination you can do in order from all the cranial nerves in order, but the bare minimum, you have to check the fundus, visual fields, pupil size, reactivity, extraocular movements, facial movements, etc. Then motor examination, we have to look for muscle atrophy, extremity tone, pronator drift and strength, then biceps patellar, Achilles reflexes, then lower extremity. The appearance tone of the muscle, increased tone may be evident as spasticity. And we already discussed the rigidity. Okay. Then cogwheel rigidity. Then the strength, the gradations. Strength of muscle strength can be checked. Reflexes should be checked. Then cutaneous reflexes. And the plantar reflex, the characteristic Babinski sign. There will be extensor plantar reflex. And the glabellar tap may be positive in Parkinson's. And sensory examination may be done by light touch, pain, temperature, vibration, etc. Then coordination should be looked. This coordination examination is important because we have to rule out cerebellar affections as well, because the patient is having postural instability. We have to look coordination, movements of hands, finger to nose, or heel knee shin maneuvers. These are bare minimum tests, okay? And the gait examination. We know different types of gaits owing to different diseases. Okay, there is decreased arm swing on one side. It can also be there in corticospinal tract. There can be broad-based unstable gait in ataxia, scissoring gait in spasticity, high-stepped slapping gait in peripheral neuropathies. Then the patient may appear to stuck in place in apraxia with frontal lobe diseases. So these examinations are important. The neurological diagnosis, other laboratory assessments are also done in neurological assessment, but for Parkinsonism, what is needed? Clinical diagnosis is enough. But why we are studying all other diagnoses, all other investigations? Because we have to exclude other causes of Parkinsonism. That is, other causes that tend to produce similar symptoms. You see, our brain, our neurology, the system is like an ocean. A slight change in electrical signal, a slight change in enzyme, slight change in protein, everything can produce a lot of symptoms because it's brain. Any simple change can manifest as symptoms. So it's helpful for us as homeopaths, but we need to know which part is affected by which. So we are investigating just to rule out other conditions, to rule out other diseases are not there. While discussing the cases, I shall tell you the more relevance of this aspect. Okay, so patients when presenting with Parkinsonism disorders, Parkinsonism symptoms before the age of 50, they have to be checked for Wilson's disease, then CT, MRI, etc. may be needed to rule out other lesions. Let's see, neuroimaging, brain MRI, it's helpful to detect cerebrovascular damages. Here, you may think why? Because there is another case called vascular Parkinsonism. What's it? Due to some stroke, especially lacunar strokes, that is in minute arteries, it can produce symptoms similar to Parkinsonism. When the block is there, when the thrombus is there in the region near to amygdala, near to pons and all, they produce similar symptoms of Parkinsonism. So we have to rule out if it is due to Parkinsonism itself or where there is any stroke. Then we have to rule out any other structural lesion. One case discussed by one of my friends whose husband was an Ayurvedic practitioner who was well managing Parkinsonism cases. And one of the case they diagnosed as Parkinsonism, the revealed in MRI as a tumor, a minute tumor. And it was removed and most of the symptoms were gone. So we have to decide all this, whether it should be done in time, how it should be managed, etc. These neuroimaging techniques help us. So after MRI, there is PET and PET, single photon emission, then PET scanning. Okay. So these are imaging in PD patient. And there are tracers used like flu deoxyglucose. There can be different patterns in different diseases. And let's not go into detail, just to let you all know these investigations are there. Okay. So this is PET imaging. Then imaging below neck in PD. We already discussed there are a lot of non-motor symptoms affecting those intestines, everything. So these images below neck help us to reveal whether there is any dysfunction of pharyngeal and esophageal motility, gastric emptying, anorectal function, etc. So cardiac imaging may be done by iodine meta, iodobenzyl guanidine, MIBG. These short forms have to be familiarized because in the report they'll only write this, MIBG. We may wonder what it is. So just to get familiarized with the terms, I am just telling you all this. Then imaging parasympathetic nervous system with PET tracer. Okay. Then oropharynx, dysphagia, functional imaging studies. Now there is a tool, simple screening tool for Parkinson's disease. It's CDEPA questionnaire. So the investigations we know, the clinically we can diagnose. To rule out other conditions, we may take MRI, CT, PET, SPECT, etc. And this is a screening tool, CDEPA questionnaire. See the expansion of CDEPA. Questionario de Enfermedad de Parkinson Avanzada. Don't worry, it's just a Spanish questionnaire. That's by the name. It's just questionnaire for advanced Parkinson's disease. It was developed to determine which patients will benefit from the alternative treatment options. Okay, so this is for advanced Parkinson's. How can we know it's advanced? This is the tool. They are classifying the symptoms into definitive, probable, possible symptoms. Just to let you know, when you see CDPA, just relate that it is with Parkinsonism. That's all. Okay, you can refer this in later. So all symptoms are scored either yes or no. And the patients are asked whether the symptoms are present or not. And if these definitive symptoms are present, we can diagnose it as Parkinsonism. And when there are two symptoms from different areas, we can like from general characteristic, disability, motor symptoms, etc. of the probable level places the case as definitive case. Okay, so depending on the symptoms present, we can classify it as definitive case of Parkinsonism, probable case of Parkinsonism, etc. So what is APD? It is advanced Parkinson's disease. That is, many of the symptoms are not improving with their conventional therapies with DOPA. They need deep brain stimulation. Such cases are called advanced PD. And they may reach our schizophrenic stage and all. Now, HY scale. When you see one HY scale, just know that it's related to Parkinsonism. Yeah, right. So there are different. No need to go into detail. And just getting you acquainted with these terms. HY scale is related with Parkinsonism. There are different stages depending on the disability, like no signs of disease, stage 0. One side only, stage 1. Okay. If the patient is disabled to such an extent that he needs a wheelchair or bedridden, it is stage 5. Then another scale, this you might have seen in most of the cases, SCOPA scale, scales for outcomes in Parkinson's disease. Here also many motor functions, activities, daily activities, etc. are graded. Then another, some scales, non-motor symptom scale is there, clinical impression of severity index, clinical global impression, etc. These are some scales used for assessing Parkinson's disease. So this is a gold standard, what? Clinical judgment. How? Depending on the clinical characteristic, we can stage it as initial stage, mild stage. This is the gold standard. Moderate, advanced, and late stage. Okay. So we can simply diagnose it clinically, but there can be assessing tools for grading the severity of the disease. So what can be other differential diagnoses? We already discussed many other diseases having protein aggregates like multiple system atrophy, then dementia with Lewy bodies, etc. Some with tau protein like progressive supranuclear palsy, corticobasal degeneration. Then there can be non-degenerative disorders presenting with tremors. You know, essential tremor, dystonic tremor, drug-induced Parkinsonism, vascular Parkinsonism, which I said you earlier regarding stroke in those areas which may produce symptoms similar to Parkinsonism. Then metabolic tremors like hypothyroidism, etc. So there can be exaggerated physiological tremor, then Wilson's disease, multiple sclerosis, cerebellar diseases, etc. So what's the difference between essential tremor and our Parkinson's? Parkinson's usually resting tremor, and essential tremor usually by posture, by in an action. And it can be symmetrical, where Parkinson's can be asymmetrical. Then in writing, it's micrographia. There, it's just tremulous writing, trembling. Head can also be affected in essential tremor. Then the classical signs, bradykinesia, rigidity, loss of postural reflexes are the main features of Parkinsonism. And another factor is essential tremor always respond to alcohol. And here we use levodopa. Okay. So what's the management by modern system? They use levodopa combined with the dopa decarbylase inhibitor, because to prevent the levodopa decarboxylation in the periphery. Okay. Dopamine decarbylation in the periphery. Then other agents are anticholinergic drugs, dopamine receptor agonist, selgilin, COMT inhibitors, etc. These are the common used drugs. There are a lot of other drugs. These are the main drugs. Okay. So another point of interest, can we use dopamine-rich food items? It's seen that banana is rich in dopamine, but what is the problem? That dopa cannot enter blood-brain barrier, so there is no use. It just reaches the gut. No, banana is rich in dopamine, it's not going to enter the blood-brain barrier. Then what? So we have to select food rich in levodopa. So this is a point of interest which may be helpful in our study as well, using our drugs. See, Mucuna pruriens is rich in levodopa. Then Vicia faba is another plant. Hopefully we may get further researches in this aspect for our medicine. The seeds of cassia and bauhinia trees also contain levodopa. So we need levodopa to cross the blood-brain barrier. And the surgery, it's stereotactic thalamotomy, then deep brain stimulation. Usually the candidates are levodopa responsive Parkinsonism, and deep brain stimulation is most often performed bilaterally, simultaneously, etc. Okay. Then of course, physiotherapy, speech therapy are almost always needed to help the patient improve the quality of living. And Ayurveda therapies, they make use of this. And we also should promote the accessory management. Okay, physiotherapy, speech therapy, etc. will be beneficial to the patient. And the cognitive training. This is another study in which it was seen that cognitive training can reduce the severity of FOG. The freezing of gait is reduced by cognitive training. Okay, this was an interesting study. Now the prognosis. The outlook for patients with Parkinson's disease is variable. It depends on the age of onset. You know, the younger the age, there is genetic predominance and the disease tend to progress. And if the onset is after 70, it's unlikely to shorten life. Why? Because it's already aging, Okay, so now regarding homeopathic management, can you tell what can be the miasmatic expression? I would say the initial stages with non-motor symptoms, neurological, that functional disorders, all present to us as just SORA. Okay, maybe, but the pattern of diseases tend towards when the degeneration progresses. It's a degeneration that's occurring, it's a neural degeneration, and so the pattern can be said as syphilitic. Okay, so how we are going to manage? You have to manage the case constitutionally. Also, there will be acute emergencies. Why? Because, see, we cannot leave the patient as such by giving a single dose. We can wait for months. Okay, the patient is well. We cannot leave the case because the disease has to be followed up. As the patient ages, what happens? The patient has to tackle both the aging process as well as the disease. So there can be acute emergencies. You should expect acute emergencies in the, acute symptoms, which may be quite distressing to the patient. Like sometimes there may be acute abdominal cramps, presenting as acute abdomen, maybe violent cramps in abdomen. Sometimes it will be vertigo with, what to say, with a feeling of helplessness. We cannot get up from the bed, severe vertigo, postal hypotension, or sometimes there can be retention, sometimes there can be frequency and urgency of urination. These all can present as acute emergencies. So hence, at this time, we may have to interfere with our acute drugs as well. And of course, supportive measures should be there. The rigidity can be tackled only by keeping the patient active, by physiotherapy, by speech therapy. The patient should be active. It should be given cognitive training as well, and should be trained to write. Okay, should be encouraged to write, read aloud. All supportive measures should be given. So constitutional remedy can be given, acute medicines may be needed, and the supportive measures. All this constitute our management. Let's discuss. I am just briefing out some of the cases. So the first case we discussed earlier, that was about that was a case of 48-year-old, and the medicine given by our professor was Merxol. Okay, and it was well controlled. Now, some of my cases, it's a 84-year-old female. I'm just giving the essence of the case. Okay, she was having common symptoms, all of Parkinsonism. There was tremor of hands, and she was having highly offensive urine, frequent profuse urination. And this case I haven't seen directly. They are in the tribal area. I'm working where I'm working, and her daughter visit me with these symptoms, and I never get a chance to visit her directly because they were far away. And the urine had white sediments. Her gait was unsteady, but she was doing her, she was taking her food and drinks as usual. At this stage, considering the essence, the medicine I gave was Merxol. And with Merxol, she was controlled for a while, for say about 2-3 months. You should not expect complete absence of tremor. Okay, tremor will be there, but we can control it. And also, if they are on dopaminergic drugs, you should not stop them at a sudden, because this dopamine has always an addiction. Dopamine have very much relation with another pathways, in addition to alcohol, as all you know. Similarly, the dopamine drugs cannot be stopped all at once. But if we are confident enough that our medicine has acted and the person is under control of our medicine, we can taper the dose and control the case. Here I give Merxol. She was not on any other drugs, especially in rural area. They may not be aware of what Parkinsonism is. Bystanders will be very much anxious. Why this tremor? Why she is trembling? Why she is having frequent urination? What's the cause? Even after all MRIs, everything, that nothing will be found. So we may not be able to convince the patient. We have to teach them what the condition is. Okay, many of the neurologists may not explain it in detail to rural people, and they may come to us. So we have to tell them this, we have to expect in future. This is not going to stop all on a sudden. What can be in the future? How we have to support the patient? What sort of helplessness he or she is going to face? Patient may not be able to fasten his own button of the shirt, cannot shave, cannot write. So Supportive measures are very important. Support from the family is very essential. The patient will be in a helpless state. He cannot control his movement, and sometimes he cannot move, or sometimes his movement will be uncontrollable in form of tremor. So all these conditions we need support. So in this case, Merxol 200 helped to control the tremor. It's not that the tremor went off all on a sudden. No, there was tremor, but it was controlled. Offensiveness of urine was controlled. Again, 3 months later, suddenly, this is what I said, sometimes acute episodes. 3 months later, the daughter came running. The patient is lying unresponsive, complete apathy. She's not responding to anything, but she's not in stupor, not complete stupor, but she's not responding. And she needs support to take food and drinks all on a sudden. So the medicine I gave at that time was acid force. And after that, she was quite well. And also, most of the time, we need acute prescription for vertigo and all that I had given in this case as well. There's another case, which is an advanced, that is tending to psychosis with schizophrenia, hallucinations and all. The patient have cramps in abdomen, lack of appetite, vertigo rising from bed, chilliness, trembling of whole body, numb feeling in feet, paralyzed feeling of arms, tremor of feet, especially right, severe aching of calf muscles, then hallucinations, then delusion. See, all this, it's a wonderful thing that in most of the psychology cases of schizophrenia, they have similar pattern of hallucination or similar delusions, like a delusion of being persecuted, delusion of electric signals coming, or delusion of someone making plans against him. These are features of schizophrenia. So that can be produced in similar neurological affections too. Here also, there's a constant delusion. So if the patient is having constant delusion, you may consider the symptom. Okay. Here, sleeplessness after first sleep and always disturbed with fearful dreams. There is frequency and urgency of urination, then unsatisfied stool, ineffectual urging, and the patient is always having illness from apprehension, anticipation, bad news, nervous, irritable, and highly fastidious, anxiety at trifles, and other comorbidities. That's another problem, because on geriatric cases in old age persons, they'll be having a lot of other comorbidities. So we'll have to tackle everything together. And it's not an easy job. We have to give importance to what is most distressing to the patient. It's always reminded by one of my professor, Dr. Pragasar of Padilla College. He always says, our first and highly mission, what Hanuman said, is to restore the sick to health, to cure. So first, let him come to health. What is health? The physical, social, or well-being, mental well-being. So let me improve the quality of the patient first. Let us restore him to health. Then let it be curable or non-curable. Let us restore him to health, then to cure. Okay. So look for the most distressing symptom. Just give relief to the patient. Then consider other factors and give constitutional or whatever it may be. So here other comorbidities are gallstone, gout, BPH, etc. And here the medicine I gave was now he is very well controlled in Naxovam 10. After giving hypotensives, the instant, the same night, we'll get the change because the sleep will be calm and quiet. It's not like a sedative. The patient may say he went into sleep, sound sleep, he didn't know anything. But we can tackle, we can question them and get the symptoms that even though he is into a deep sleep, he got up 2-3 times for his urination as usual. So that is a normal sleep. Okay. If he is going into deep sleep without knowing anything like a sedation by giving some tinctures and all, it may not be a going in the right direction. But here the patient is sleeping calm and quiet at the same night itself. So, but he woke up for urination also. So he felt the urging to urination, came down, came back, and then slept well. So this case is very much controlled by Nux vomica ternum. But I had to give acute prescription when he had acute retention. I had to control with aconite. Then similarly, one day he was highly delirious, beating his head all on a sudden, acute delirious stage. This we have to confront in these cases. At that time, I had to give him Bell 200. But only after all these things only, I arrived at Nux vomica ternum, and now he's controlled. Okay. Now, another case of a higher secondary principal, I would say the essence. This sir was highly anxious because as a role of principal, his main trouble was he couldn't put his signature properly now. Okay. So he was anxious of his role as the principal, and from bank walas, from treasury, many of them start questioning regarding his signature. If any malpractice is going on, the signature is different. So when he started developing these symptoms, he took leave, and later he joined because he wanted to tackle, he wanted to continue his tenure. So he joined, but it was highly stressful. He couldn't do his job properly because of this anxiety, apprehension of the signature, because he's in such a role. He's a government employee and he's a gazetted officer. He got to do a lot of signatures. So, considering this pain of anxiety of this performance of role, his role as principal, the medicine I chose was Argentum nitricum, and he was given wonderful change, wonderful result. Now, as I said earlier, we may have to give acute prescriptions, especially with vertigo, trembling. Sometimes the patient may lie trembling, like shivering, like drip triggers and all. We may have to control. And most often, in my experience, many of the cases were controlled by gels 1 or gels 200 as the case may be. Then with coculus, with vertigo, with loss of sleep and all, coculus have helped. Then this is a case of NPH. Why I'm putting this case here is to let you know the importance of investigation or to rule out the misdiagnosis of Parkinsonism. It was a case of my uncle who was presenting with Parkinsonian symptoms, but he began to show some mental changes, some dementia, etc. He was already having BPH, frequency, urgency of urination, especially at night. And hence, I again sent for an MRI and I sent him to Amrita Institute, Kochi, for further investigation. And they diagnosed the case as NPH. It's a normal pressure hydrocephalus. So we should know these conditions because it's a triad. NPH is a triad of abnormal gait, urinary incontinence, and dementia. This is the importance of diagnosing the case. It's not that we need only the symptoms to manage. It's not going to create much difference for us, perhaps, but the difference is where there can be some acute accessory management or some emergency management to be done. It's upon our discretion whether a surgery is needed emergency, whether we should advocate that surgery, whether we should remove the tumor, or we should wait with our medicine and wait for the tumor to reduce in size. See, it's brain, it's a complex mechanism going on there. So we cannot predict what's going to happen. So we should be in a position to tell the patient to give them the best treatment available, be it homeopathy, be it surgery, or be it referring to to hospital for a tapping or whatever it may be. We should be aware of the different diagnoses presenting with these symptoms. So I just put the case, put this to let you know this is a condition similarly having abnormal gait, urinary incontinence, and dementia. But we can manage with our medicine as well because in these cases they only have a tapping and all, but it's not going to help much. We can manage with our medicine, but we can know just to know the diagnosis. Okay. So directly go into the medicine. That was some of the cases. Now regarding, we shall discuss a few remedies. In Murphy, we get the rubric directly. This is Parkinson's disease. And in synthesis and in Kent, we get paralysis, agitants. And the main remedies, as you see, Costico, Merxol, Rustox, zinc. This Rustox also, I had a case of Rustox. Rustox, the patient always is similar to a genericum case. This patient will always have an anxiety that he had an attack of tremor, whole body tremor in bed, and the bystanders couldn't help. He was trembling like anything one day. So the next month he will have a feeling that, okay, last month this day I had trembling, so this month I'm going to get it. He's having some sort of superstitiousness. So the remedy, so the most distressing anxiety was this. So when the patient comes to us, what is mostly distressing him? What is affecting him? That has to be considered. So here, fear superstitious was the rubric taken by me, and Vastros was given, and he was very much improved. So Singamet, metals are very good remedies, and many of our lectures, bromides Singam bromide, hyoscine hydrobromide, etc. are showing some results. I have no personal experience. Okay, from lectures I have seen bromides, calibrom, etc. having some effect in this twitchings and tremblings. So let's go into some drugs. Very few drugs. Mercurius, you know the general features. I don't have to explain, I think. Then causticum again. These are just particular symptoms I have written. You have to look the holistic person as a whole. The patient will be, sympathetic. He cannot intolerate justice, cannot tolerate justice, and he'll have aversion to sweets. Okay. Then Singamet, another medicine which has high action on delusions, hallucinations, and all. Singamet is highly preferred with projectile flex. Okay. Then Plumbamet, it's a heavy metal again. Then phosphorus. So in right-sided paralysis agitants, phosphorus is indicated. Can lie only on right side, can scarcely hold anything with his hands. And sulfur. Pestos, I said, fear superstitious was one of the rubric taken. Then argentum nitricum, gelsemium, tarantula. Tarantula is also indicated in ADHD because there is dopamine excess in ADHD, whereas here there is dopamine reduction. So it can come due to some abnormalities in dopamine. There can be restlessness. Okay. Then calibrom, the bromide again, fidgety hands. Antiprode has this wonderful symptom, weakness or shake of hands in writing, followed by offensive flatness. If you get this peculiar symptom, and if that is most distress interpretation, you may try. I have no personal experience with antiprode. Then absinthium. Some of the rare remedies we may look: trauma, sudden severe giddiness, delirium with hallucination, loss of consciousness. May be helpful in some acute prescriptions when you are not getting much symptoms of the patient. Mostly bystanders may tell you. So these medicines may help you to palliate. Here the twitchings ceases during sleep and symptoms appear diagonally, right time, left leg. If this is characteristically present, you may try agaricus. Then syncytial in rheumatic persons with jerking of limbs. Then cocculus. It's almost always indicated in patients in advanced disease with sleep disorders. Then lolium temulentum is like specific for cannot write, cannot hold a glass of water, trembling of hands and paralysis. I have no experience with this. And physostigma. I just mentioned some of the drugs having some presentations of Parkinson's. Then hyoscine hydrobromine. As I said, many of pioneers have said their experiences with bromide. Hyoscine hydrobromide is one of the remedy for shaking palsy in some of the lectures. Then camphora bromata, bromide of camphor. The zinc cyanatum, almost zinc bromide, zinc cyanatum, zinc metallicum, everything. Then duboisia. Scopolamine, scutellaria. So now we just discuss some of the cases, the clinical features, some of the recent researchers in pathology, then investigations to be done, how to roll out other pathologies, other comorbidities, how we can manage constitutionally by using active prescriptions, by the most distressing symptoms, etc. So what can we do by homeopathy? What's our role? Hopefully, as I said, hopefully some of the scientists who are genuinely interested in subject may help us to get to know what is actually now medicine. Okay, now all burden are upon us. We have to treat, we have to diagnose the case, we have to diagnose the disease, we have to diagnose the individual, and we have to find out what is in our medicine, what's the content of medicine as well. That's a scenario. So hopefully many scientists who are genuinely interested may help us to find what is actually in our medicine, the nanoparticles or the high dilutions of alkaloids or the ultra-filtrates that are acting, that are crossing the blood-brain barrier and helping, or are they having any dopaminergic action? Okay, so all these may be future areas of interest. Those who are interested in research can look in those spheres. And here I just thank my senior Harish for giving me this quote. This is what Hanuman had said about our medicine. See, let them learn from the mathematicians how true it is that a substance divided into ever so many parts, but still contained in its smallest conceivable part, always some of the substance, and that The smallest conceivable part does not cease to be some of the substance and cannot possibly become nothing. So however small it is, however small conceivable part it cannot be nothing. There can be something there to exert its effect. That's what homeopathy is. And hopefully future may be ours with the discovery of the content of a medicine as well. But we are even now embedded with our medicine, wonderful medicines with many actions, permeating actions into the cellular level, genetic level as well. So I open the further areas of research before you. Those are interested in researchers, they carry forward. Okay. And this is the red tulip of indicating Parkinson's disease. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chitra. It was a wonderful session, actually. I interrupted in between. Sorry for that.
Thank you.
With that session, if participants are having any doubts, I think some doubts are there. Can I ask that?
Okay,
Can you see the chat box right there? You can see the
let me see.
doubts. If not, then I can ask the questions.
Tremor common to disease shall we consider in analysis? See, tremor as such may not be taken. These are common symptoms, but why we are taking the tremor is um, tremor as such is not taken. Okay, it's just a part of the disease. But if there is any uncommon peculiarity like trembling is completely absent at night. Okay, if there is any modality for that, or if there is uncommon peculiarity, we can give more weightage. Okay. It's a vast topic, neurology. Many conditions may be overlapping. Is it possible to cure Parkinson's? I don't think it's curable completely because, see, I told you already, we have to move with the patient. We have to follow the patient because as the age advances, the brain is already in an aging process. The neurons are in an atrophied stage. So the patient has to tackle both the aging and the medicine. So we can help them improve the life quality of living, and our medicine can uh, stop the progression. Okay, progression of the disease can be arrested or at least controlled. Anything else? Anything else, Debu?
Yeah. I think the doubts are coming up. Choreas in sleep and twitching, jerking. Then what is your opinion on gyro gloves? Why are they developing this?
Opinion on?
No? Gyro gloves. I don't get that. Okay. Involuntary closure of eyelids with profuse frequency of urination and fog. Prognosis and our medicine.
You are asking for specific or what?
Involuntary closure of eyelids with profuse frequency of urination. What is the
Increasing
problem?
of heat. See, prognosis depends on how we are going to tackle the case with our medicine. The prognosis, what I explained in the slide was regarding the Parkinson's disease in general, because they have only dopaminergic drugs. And the dopamine drug itself tend to produce a lot of side effects. If given in a long course, actually the medicine are going to trigger a lot of the parts of the brain, lot of the functions of the brain. They may trigger hallucinations and they may start giving other psychiatric drugs as well, even sedatives they are giving. Their management is like supplying dopamine which is deficient, then again tackling the dopaminergic symptoms. Then when the patient move on to psychiatric stage, they will give psychiatric drugs, even they refer to psychiatric. That's what they are doing. Prognosis depends on how we manage the case actually. It's like how I told you in the case of 84-year female. She is 84 years old. We are not going to help her walk like a young lady or anything. She's already aged. So what we can do is to help her improve the quality of life. Okay. And in dopamine cases, if we are helpless, if we are not arriving at a medicine, okay, let the patient suffer. Like if we should be ready to, as we should refer to some other good hospitals, or at least always do a neurological checkup to rule out other diseases. If the tremor is out of control, let them have the dopamine they are taking. Do not stop it all on a sudden. Let it be controlled. Okay, you can taper the dose. Once you have the patient under your control, your medicine, you can taper the dose confidently. Otherwise, don't do it. You can taper the dose. You cannot stop it all on a sudden. That's what my advice is. And I am not a person who researched in Parkinsonism or anything. That's why I'm saying I have shared some of the cases, but you can, I am not an authoritative person to say, okay, this dose was effective, this potency is effective. For that, I need to study a lot of cases. Okay, not a handful of 10 or 12 cases, not enough for that. I need to do research in Parkinsonism to have an authoritative talk on the dose, potency, the medicine, etc. I have shared some of the experiences, and I have just tried to create an awareness about Parkinsonism, recent advances in research as well. That's all.
Okay, Dr. Chitra. I think
I hope that's
enough. Actually, they are asking for medicine. Actually, medicine prescribed for NPH.
For that case, actually, he had a characteristic symptom. While admitting into hospital, he was just a little delirious, like a personality disorder and all. He was behaving, and he was just irritable and telling, I have nothing, why you have admitted here? That was the symptom. And it was controlled by Arnika Varnam. Okay. And later, a few months back, months later, he was having some characteristic symptom of, he was a little threatening, abusive, and he wanted light, etc. And I gave him stramonium, and he was controlled. Anything else?
Yeah, I will ask.
Hope that's
I think
enough for
it's a
now.
good. I think we are already 15 minutes late. Okay, it's okay. Can we conclude the
Okay.
session, Doctor?
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
So
Thank you,
those
one
who
and
wanted
all.
to.
Thank you, IHMA, for giving me this session.
Okay. So I thank Dr. Chitra Suresh for taking such a wonderful session for us. Sorry, Chitra CB. It was a great experience, and we hope to see more sessions from you. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank
And
you.
we will
Thank
be
you, one
having a
and all.
session by our School of Homeopathy Director, Dr. Sabi, evening. So hope to see you all there. Thank you.